Brian, a recent graduate, needed a job. Bad. College left him broke. Ramen noodles every night. Ugh. He had worked so hard for that diploma, but now it felt like just a piece of paper. The reality of student loans and bills was hitting him hard. He scrolled through job sites, each one more depressing than the last. Fast food cashier? Retail assistant? Nothing seemed to match his qualifications or his dreams. I have a degree in philosophy, he thought, feeling the weight of his student debt. He chucked his phone on the couch. Defeat, despair. The future seemed bleak, and his motivation was dwindling. The only things he could make were bad decisions and instant ramen. Suddenly his phone buzzed. An email. Could this be the break he was waiting for? Subject, chef wanted. Chef. He was puzzled but intrigued. Brian hadn't gone to culinary school, but he could boil water like a champ. Maybe this was a sign, a new direction. Plus the pay was amazing, more than he ever expected for an entry-level job. He dialed the number, heart pounding. A raspy voice answered.
You want job? Come in now, click.
Brian grabbed his coat. This was it. A new chapter was about to begin. The restaurant was different. Gourmand's giblets. Charming in a peculiar way. It had an air of mystery that drew Brian in, despite its dilapidated appearance. Inside, flickering gas lamps cast long shadows, creating an eerie yet oddly comforting atmosphere. The only other light came from a roaring fireplace. Odd, considering it was July. The heat from the fire mixed with the summer warmth, making the room stifling. Brian wiped sweat from his brow, feeling the oppressive heat. A woman with a single, unblinking eye sat behind the counter, her gaze piercing through the dim light.
You Brian?
She croaked. Brian nodded, trying not to stare at her eye, which seemed to follow his every move.
Follow.
She led him down a narrow hallway. The air grew colder with each step, sending shivers down his spine. He could hear faint chanting coming from behind a door at the end of the hall. The sound was both mesmerizing and terrifying. His stomach grumbled, not from hunger, from fear. The anticipation was almost unbearable. They reached the door. The woman pounded on it 3 times, each knock echoing through the hallway. Silence. Then a voice boomed, breaking the tension.
Enter!
The room was dark, lit by a single flickering candle on a large, ornate table. Shadows danced on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of Brian's neck stand up. 3 figures sat around it, their faces shrouded in shadow. Brian gulped, feeling a lump form in his throat as he tried to make out their features. One of the figures gestured towards a chair, the movement slow and deliberate, almost as if they were savoring the moment.
Sit, Brian.
His voice was deep, gravelly. Brian sat, his legs feeling like jelly. He could feel the weight of their stares, piercing through the darkness. He couldn't help but notice the strange utensils on the table. They looked ancient, almost ritualistic. A fork with 3 prongs? It looked more like a trident than a dining utensil. A spoon that looked more like a tiny cauldron? What kind of place was this?
So, Brian, you want to cook, yes?
Brian swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Yes, sir, I believe so. His voice wavered, betraying his nerves. He wished he sounded more confident. The uncertainty gnawed at him. The figures chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent chills down his spine.
Good, good. We're always looking for fresh ingredients.
Brian's blood ran cold. Ingredients? What did they mean by that? His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. What did they mean by that? The room seemed to close in on him, the shadows growing darker and more menacing.
Let's see what you've got, Brian.
One figure clapped. 2 hulking men wheeled in a serving cart, covered by silver cloches. Brian's stomach churned. He forced a smile. "Brian, what's for dinner?" he joked, his voice cracking. No response. The figures stared at him, their eyes like ice. The first cloche lifted. Brian gasped. It wasn't food, at least not anything he recognized. A pulsating purple blob oozed on the plate. It smelled like rotten eggs and fear. Brian gagged. The second cloche lifted. A pale, shriveled hand lay on the plate, its fingers twitching. Brian's dinner, a distant memory, threatened to make a reappearance. He was going to be sick.
Now, Brian, tell us how you would prepare these delicacies.
Brian just stared, speechless at the grotesque offerings. He had stumbled into something sinister, he realized. This wasn't a job interview. It was a nightmare. Before he could even attempt a response, a contract appeared on the table.
Sign?
The figure commanded. Brian hesitated. Brian, what is this?
Just a formality.
The figure assured him, his voice dripping with malice. Trapped, Brian signed. Instantly, the room temperature plummeted. The figures rose, their forms now visible in the flickering candlelight. They were monstrous, with glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws.
Now, Brian, cook, or become the ingredient.